we are going to start, since already it's getting quite full. I'd like to welcome everyone to Junction. I am Lia Shortino. I am the founder and director of Junction, and Junction is the venue you see here. It's a reading room. Normally you can come and read about Southeast Asia, but also we have a number of events, from photo exhibition, art exhibition, as well as panel discussion like this, all related to the different dimensions and aspects of Southeast Asia. From the most challenging, like in this case climate change or migration, refugees and similar topic, to more the richness of the region, like textile and other kinds of arts. So we try to cover the entire spectrum and the many dimensions of Southeast Asia. We are very glad to be collaborating today with the Canadian mission to ASEAN, which is represented today by Stuart, First Secretary of the Canadian Embassy in Bangkok. So this is a partnership, and also I am very glad to be hosting Renzo, who I know since he was even younger than this, but he had just finished his PhD at Harvard University on the topic of planetary health, with the case of the Philippines. And as we know, Philippines is very prone to natural disaster, including because of the situation of the natural resources. So he will be talking about that, and then again another old friend, which we didn't see for many years, but now she is in Bangkok. She was in Indonesia before, Amy, and she is with the Earth Journalist Network. And she will be talking because they have a special report on this, a series of reports on this issue. So without further ado, Renzo, please.
Sure. Thank you. Sorry. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Or I'll do that microphone. Yeah, on Facebook. Sure. Oh, yeah. Okay. There we are online. Hello, hello. Okay, let's wait for a bit. Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for having me. Leah, thank you to the Junction. It's actually my first time to be in this beautiful space. And I wish that every ASEAN country has this kind of platform where we can actually have frank and honest and open and collegial discussions about issues that confront not just each of our countries, but the whole region. I always describe myself not just as a Filipino citizen and not just as a global citizen, but also as an ASEANist. Okay? And actually, when Leah was referring to my younger years, which was like maybe 5-6 years ago, I was leading a project in the Philippines entitled ASEAN Youth Dialogues. Because when ASEAN integration was launched in 2015, there was a survey that among the 10 ASEAN countries, there were 2 countries that have the lowest awareness in terms of, when it comes to ASEAN stuff, and the Philippines was one. And so we were very concerned that we were entering this integration era, and the Filipino, especially the young people, were not even aware of what ASEAN is. And so we started the project, and I already finished my Harvard studies, and then now I'm back in Southeast Asia, and I'm still working on issues pertaining to the region. And today I'm going to talk a bit about climate change, which has been described as the defining challenge of our era, of our century, and how it's affecting human health. So I'm a physician by training, and I did a public health degree eventually. And so I'm very concerned about how climate change is going to affect the health of my patients and the whole population. So I just want this out, as soon as now, because you probably were thinking, we live in the era of the coronavirus, and does it have anything to do with climate change? I'm not going to answer this question, because it's still a question that many scientists are still trying to answer. But what we know is that in a warming planet, the bugs become very hyperactive. Okay, the bugs are very, they even mutate very quickly. And so maybe this has something to do with climate change, but we have to still do more studies when it comes to coronaviruses and other infectious pandemics. So speaking of my younger years, just want to show to you, how did the physicians start working on issues like climate change and environmental protection? So when I was still a med student, I was doing all of these, right? Studying in med school, doing dissection of cadavers and looking at microscopes. I saw you like, your wins, when you heard about cadavers. But this is also what I've been doing. Bringing health students, nursing students, fellow doctors to plant trees in the forested areas, to help clean the Manila Bay, so on and so forth. Because early on in my training in med school, I already realized how critical the environment is in the creation or destruction of human health. And then it continued when I was already a full-fledged physician, working with fellow advocates on issues around climate and health. So here we were saying coal kills, so let's kill coal. Because coal is a leading driver of climate change, and I want to hear more later about your insight about coal and energy. But also coal power plants are releasing a toxic cocktail of air pollutants that lead to asthma attacks, heart disease, so on and so forth. This was in Paris during the signing of the Paris Agreement in 2015, which is very historic. Unfortunately, we have the US withdrawing and the country still not, implementing what they committed to do. And then just last December, I was just talking to a friend a while ago. We were President Obama in Kuala Lumpur, 200 emerging leaders from Asia Pacific, looking at, working on a wide range of different issues. So I was the climate guy in this group, and it was just very inspiring. I think the future of Asia, and Southeast Asia in particular, is very bright because of young people who are making a difference. I've been writing a lot about climate and health, and I love it that I'm going to have a conversation with a journalist later. So, what is our role in communicating climate change to the broader public, and why is a health framing so powerful? They probably will, the people will probably not absorb or understand what is carbon, right? What is CO2? What is global warming? But they know that if dengue hits their kids because of climate change, then that is not good, right? And that is very personal. And I was talking to someone a while ago, what am I going to do now after my studies? And going back to the Philippines to build this PH lab. And PH stands for Philippines, that's a nickname of my country. Like in Thailand, but it's Thailand, the PH, right? But it's also Philippine health, public health, and planetary health. Okay? Climate change was described in one journal as the biggest global health threat of the 21st century. But I think it's now time to flip the messaging and instead say that tackling climate change could be a global health opportunity. If we address climate change, we can save a lot of lives and we can improve health on a planetary scale. That's why I always describe addressing climate change as a planetary vaccine. Okay? And climate change is going to affect health in many different ways. So I'm not going into detail, but you will see that there are many pathways through which climate change affects health. Flooding, drought, typhoons, for example in the Philippines, heat waves, which our friends from Europe are already experiencing. And when these climate-related events happen, these are the health consequences. Nutrition will be affected, because of drought, food insecurity, injuries as a result of natural disasters. And we've seen that a lot in the Philippines. Infectious diseases, okay? Whether it's dengue, malaria, and now we're questioning, is the coronavirus linked to it as well? And heart diseases, because when you're exposed to intense heat, especially the elderly, then that weakens your body, and that's why in Europe, for example, when there's a heat wave, you see a spike in emergency room visits. Okay? So the planet's health is important to prevent infectious diseases, but we still tend to be very, biomedical in approach, curative, and not really thinking of the broader environment where these viruses and bacteria do thrive. So we really need an ecological approach to addressing all these disease conditions. Okay? Even Ebola, for example, if you remember in 2013, West Africa, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea were affected by Ebola, and there were some hypotheses. Some scientists were hypothesizing maybe climate change has something to do with it as well. It's not just infectious diseases that will be affected. Okay? There was a recent study saying that there is an interconnection between climate change, obesity, and undernutrition. Because of the food system that emits carbon, that makes people fat, but also because it's inaccessible to some people, then you need, there's a high level of, undernutrition and stunting in other parts of the world. So some people are over-consuming, and some people don't even have to eat. So it's also an issue of inequity. And that is why there were suggestions, maybe it's time, who among you are even using different types of diet? Keto diet, very popular, right? Weight reduction diets, Atkins, South Beach. I think this is the diet that we should be looking at. Okay? Are we prepared, right? Especially here in Bangkok, where your food is so great. But here, if you see, meat consumption is very small, and almost half of the plate should be green, veggies, and vegetables and fruits. So, and this is not just a technical issue, it's a cultural transformation that needs to happen. You have these new problems where islands are disappearing because of sea level rise. And as a result, people are moving, but we don't have international instruments that will support the migration. You mentioned a while ago migration, and climate-induced migration is already a reality. And now we live in a world where countries are closing their borders. Some are even building walls. Okay? So how can we reconcile these contradictions, right? Where mobility will be a fact of life, whether it's because of economics or, unfortunately, conflict, and now because of climate. It's important to also remember that the effects of climate change, while it's wide-ranging, you already saw my graph a while ago, they will not be equitably or evenly distributed. So here at the top map, you will see the parts of the world that emitted the greatest amount of greenhouse gases being magnified. And what are those parts of the world? First world countries, okay? North America, Europe, and China. Okay? Let's not forget, China is the latest emitter. Okay? And then here you see parts of the world that will be bearing the brunt, the health consequences of climate change. It's Africa, Asia, and the Pacific Islands. Probably they're already erased from the face of the earth when climate change becomes even worse, because they're too small and sea level rise is worsening the situation. Now I'm shifting gears and will show to you a bit how is Southeast Asia going to be affected by all of these effects of climate change that we're seeing. So, there's a Lancet report saying Southeast Asia, ASEAN, is a microcosm of global health. You know, every problem that you have in, health problem that you have in the world, you can find it here, right? Undernutrition, poverty, viruses, disasters, right? Failing health systems, expensive healthcare. And this is the reality, and I'm not going to detail. Southeast Asia is a climate hotspot. Okay? We are at the center of this crisis. Okay? And I'm not sure if either individually, as countries, or as a region, we are doing our very best to make sure our people are protected from the health problems that will be generated by climate change. See these maps? Okay? The redder the country is, the more vulnerable it is to climate change. And, Indonesia, parts of the Mekong, Vietnam, and of course, the Philippines. And here you will see, if it's red, it will be affected by climate change, by increase in temperature. So which country is exempted among the 10 ASEAN countries? All of them will be affected by climate change, according to this study. And there was actually a very new report showing that, or stating that, the mega cities of the world will be inundated by 2050, including Bangkok and Jakarta. And see, in this map, so they did this 2014 study, and they thought those are the parts of Bangkok that will be flooded. They did an update, and they actually underestimated it. The whole of Bangkok will be flooded by 2050. Okay? But the region is, still emitting a lot of carbon. Okay? Look at these countries. And our carbon emissions keep on increasing by 5% annually. So how are we really preparing for this climate crisis, or even trying to prevent it from happening? Okay? And I talked about air quality a while ago because, the same sources of climate change are also the very sources of air pollution. Look at the top cities where there is a high level of air pollution. Okay? Very familiar cities, all belonging to our region. And then, of course, natural disasters will continue to occur. Philippines, for example, number 2 in climate risk index. I always say the Philippines in top notchers in several things, like boxing, Miss Universe, and disaster vulnerability. And you have typhoons that are already as huge as the archipelago itself. This is Typhoon Haiyan, 2013, 7,000 deaths, and millions affected and displaced. And what happens when these climate-induced extreme weather events do occur? The life-supporting systems, water, agriculture, healthcare, education, livelihood, they're all disrupted if not destroyed. And in this newspaper front page, the day after, it says there, the worst disaster to hit PH. And what is PH? As I mentioned a while ago? Now you're confused. You're saying so many different pages. Philippines, public health, planetary health. Okay. So what do we need to do? We really need a new paradigm. And to treat the planet as our patient. Okay? And what are the things that we should do? Okay? I'm jumping slides. And how do we turn this conversation from merely focusing on the health impact and instead thinking about how can, for example, the health community and the broader community make a positive impact to change the narrative. Okay? And so, for example, in my research, I've been looking at this concept called climate-smart healthcare. I'm not going to detail. I have a 200-page dissertation that you can read, okay, to learn more about it. But basically, climate-smart healthcare is healthcare that is low carbon, meaning we are reducing the footprint, the ecological footprint that we make as a sector. Because imagine, we are treating patients, but we are accomplices to the crime. Because we are emitting carbon and contributing to the crime, the emergency, the planetary emergency that we're facing. And then, of course, climate-smart healthcare is also climate resilient and climate ready. We want our hospitals and health facilities to be the last building standing. Okay? Because when disasters strike, where do people go? Do they go to the movie house? Okay. Do they go to even the government home? They go to the hospital when they are suffering from, diseases and ill health. So, to end my remarks, when I did my dissertation, I realized, I said it's 200-page long. Probably only 3 people will be reading it, and that is my committee, my 3 professors at Harvard. So I said, what if I turn my dissertation into films? Perhaps my ideas and my findings will be much more accessible to the broader public. And so as I speak today, my short films have been viewed 20,000 times already in social media. And I've been invited to speak in Geneva, in many parts of Europe, and hopefully, this 2020 more in Asia, to tell the story of, these communities that while poor, while facing a lot of chronic challenges like poverty and resource limitations, they are fighting to make sure they survive in the era of planetary emergency. So I'll show to you the story of Del Carmen, Surigao del Norte, and then I will end my presentation. So the video is here, right? Where is it? So I hope you have questions for later, not difficult ones.
Next. While we wait, the next one I will give the opportunity to Stuart to tell us about why Canada. Well, we understand it's a very serious issue, but he can tell us very shortly about why Canada think this is an important issue after the movie. Yeah. And then I will pass to the last speaker of today, Ami. I also want to say that the mayor of
I want to say that later. I want to bet too much.
No, I am going to say because maybe Mr. Alfredo is among us. So we are lucky that there is another conference going on, the Prince Maidon Award Conference, and he's participating in that conference. So he's here today with us, and later on we can also hear his view on this issue. We go to Stuart then, because the movie is going to take some time. So we are going to Stuart, and then we continue with the program, and we can always see the movie at a later stage. Okay, please.
So I prepared welcome remarks, not halfway through remarks. But so I'm gonna keep this even shorter than what I already had. Mostly, I just wanted to say thank you so much to Southeast Asian Junction, Amy, and Dr. Renzo for coming to speak to us tonight. We know that climate change is a real issue, and it's a real issue for the government of Canada, and it's one that we care about very, very much. Okay. And we are a strong supporter of the Paris Accords, and we're working with ASEAN all across the region to just as Dr. Renzo is talking about, to mitigate the effects of climate change and to try to find ways to start reversing the trend. We also know that pandemic diseases are a major, major issue that's today's news, right? It's everywhere, and there's only 2 people wearing masks here today, but one thing I noticed in the last couple of weeks is that people have taken off their masks, pollution in Bangkok, and put on masks for coronavirus. And that's really interesting. We've seen incredibly decisive action by governments around the world to counteract this coronavirus. I mean, yesterday, Air Canada stopped flying to Beijing and Shanghai. Those are two of the most important routes that we have. British Airways has also done the same, no more flights to China. So when a health crisis comes up, it seems that governments are really, really good at taking really quick, decisive action. But we seem to be able to ignore the climate crisis. And that's something that is a major concern to me personally, and I think it's a concern to my government as well. So just to say that we are and will continue working with Southeast Asian countries through ASEAN, through organizations like Southeast Asian Junction, to try to reverse these trends, to try to prepare ourselves better for dealing with pandemics. Hopefully this is not a pandemic, but should they come up. And really just thank you so much for our speakers tonight, for Southeast Asian Junction, and for all of you coming to share your evening with us. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And indeed, we can discuss about the mask, whether we need or not to use the mask. That is a very long discussion. But coming from these health events, most agree that you only wear the mask if you have the symptoms. In the case of the coronavirus, it's different for the case of the AIDS. It's a very different case. So, okay, we go to the movie first. Sure. Yes, and then Abi. And thank you again, Stuart, for participating in this event. Technology is not helping us, I would say. It's quite okay. That's all.
Your regular climate behavior that you are anticipating, biglang nagbago. Di kami, naranasan talaga namin yung impacts rin of climate change, which includes the sea level rise, may coral bleaching, may drought.
Dahil ito ay coastal areas, alam ba nila, taas yung level ng dagat. Kung uulan, mas matindi yung precipitation. Kung mag-init, mas prolonged period of drought.
May mga corals daw na siguro sa increase ng, hindi natin alam if sa temperature yun, nasisira.
Dahil sa sea level rise, yung mga bahay nila ay abot na yung mga sahig nila.
Dati, kung ganito lang yung kadami ng typhoon, yung iba na, mas madami na.
We were supposedly the first to be hit. We knew the mangrove will protect us. Kung bumagsak yung dito, sabi sa amin, based on simulation, 60% of us would have been cut.
If the problem will occur today as of this moment, parang hindi, kasi marami kasi kami kakulangan. Ang pinakakulangan ng manpower, wala din kami ECG, wala kami CT scan, wala din kami X-ray. As a doctor, ang malaking epekto ng climate change sa kalusugan ng mga tao.
Rapat, yung dengue, at saka yung amoeba
iba, hindi ka nakasanayan yun sa mga tao na iniinom. So kung yun ang iinumin nila, mag-iba yung stomach nila. Ayaw ang gumagawa, tapos ang epekto, tayo din ang nag-harvest. Ayaw ang gumagawa talaga ng sakit na.
If your island community will become more inaccessible, how will you design a health system in that area? So what we did, accept na kada isang barangay, our communities, they have different health needs. And because they have different health needs, iba-iba yung approach mo.
Si healthy yung magko-complement kung paano may malusog yung mga pamayanan pagdating ng climate change.
Your local health system has to really be climate adaptive. It has to be because the changing climate will have new health challenges, and every new health challenge would require a new system, a new solution to resolve it. So it's evolving.
Pag sabihin natin climate smart, hindi siya madadaan kung gaano kayaman ng munisipyo, kundi ito ay madadaan kung paano ba makakope up si community sa mga impact ni climate change.
We thought initially it's all about infrastructures and systems. But we realized it all boils down to basic values. How do we now translate values to become part of your systems and structures?
Mas better na mag-expend tayo ng millions of money for preparation na for the response.
All of our multi-purpose centers and withstand up to typhoon signal number 4. To protect landslide, isisimento mo talaga yung road. So, it becomes access to health. That is a climate mitigation as well.
Ang food security, kahit walang dumating na mga goods ganyan sa ibang probinsya, kaya namin mabuhay.
We're also building one of the first climate field schools for farmers and fisher folks. Is to capacitate the farmer and the fisherman how to do it right if your climate is like this. Your communities, they know more than you do. Then your role becomes a facilitator. Allow them to develop a system that allows adaptation, innovation all the time. Kasi nagbabago yung sakit, depende sa klima mo.
Yung indigenous at science, pagsabayin mo dun, andun yung masasabi mong innovation.
How do you make the right decisions? Babalik at babalik ka sa science. Kaya, yun din isang ina-advocate namin, science-based governance. We now have data to make better and more informed decisions of how to change and adapt to reach our targets, our vision. The problem is, it changes all the time. We live in a world of uncertainty na eh. The only certain is that you have the capacity to address the uncertainty. The local government is at the forefront of climate change. The national government is so far away. If the drought happens next season, we simply go to the local government. That's the structure of our society.
Pag healthy yung environment mo, natural na healthy din yung mga tao. Pag ang macro management mo ay maayos, pag merong bagyo, merong storm source, yung mga tao ay maayos sila.
Their climate adaptability, which started from us understanding kung ano yung vulnerabilities namin, to preparing survival, to now having quality of life. That's preparing for the future. Climate change was never a threat to us. Kesa takutan mo siya, may mo na siya kampi. And that's why it's an opportunity to do something better.
So yeah, that is the film that I presented at school, and I asked my professors, "Where's my doctorate in filmmaking?" But so as you can see, really, climate change is already happening now. The health manifestations are already showing up, and communities are doing their very best to prepare and to address these initial effects. But some of the questions is up to what extent, the planet continues to burn because of inaction from up there, and communities that at large have really nothing to do with the crisis. They were not the ones benefiting from the burning of fossil fuels or from large-scale agriculture. You'll see farmers who are even hungry because they don't own the land, and their produce is being sold by their landlords. So these are some of the challenges, and I hope that later we'll have a broader conversation. I love being in a room where I'm the only doctor in the room. Because maybe no, but in general, because I want to be surrounded by people from all different disciplines and sectors. Because I think these challenges can only be solved if we work together across disciplinary and sector lines. So looking forward to our conversation in a bit, and thank you for listening.
The communication part and the importance, as has been said before, of using all kinds of voices to change, to bring change into what seems a hopeless situation at some point of time. So please, Abby, tell us what you have been doing.
Thank you very much, Leah, and thank you very much all for coming to this discussion. I'm very surprised that so many of you turned up because I think sort of everybody's attention is on the novel coronavirus at the moment, and I'm really glad to see that people are still interested to listen to climate change and health. Of course, like what Renzo implied, there is the speculation about the link with climate change, with regards to this virus. But what we can be very sure of is human action is causing climate change. It's causing an environmental crisis, and it's causing new virus appearing and threatening our health. So I think there's a clear link there. Thank you, Renzo, for giving a very good overview of sort of the health threats. I'm going to move this here. The health threats sort of posed by climate change. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we work with journalists to tell this climate change and health story. So my name is Amy Sim. I forgot to introduce myself. I used to be a journalist in Singapore with the Singapore Press Holding. I used to write for the Chinese newspaper in Singapore, and I'm glad to see that you have a book on Lee Kuan Yew by the Singapore Press Holding up on the shelf. So since then, I moved on to do international development. I spent many years in Indonesia working for the World Bank on community development, developing communication strategies for different projects. And I also work for Article 19 on freedom of expression projects in Asia. And now I'm in Bangkok with Internews. So I thought I would just very quickly say who we are and why we're doing this. So Internews is an international NGO with headquarters in Washington, D.C. and London. And we have our Asia and Pacific regional office here in Bangkok, which is where I work. And at Internews, we believe that information saves lives, and information is the root solution to many very challenging development issues, and that people, communities need trusted, timely, accurate information to make important decisions for their lives. So this is what we aim to do at Internews. We have a vision, a future where everyone, everywhere enjoys equal access to trusted quality information that empowers them to live healthy lives. I work for Earth Journalism Network, which is the environment program of Internews. This program was started about 15 years ago, right here in Thailand, by my colleague, our director, James Phan, who he was a journalist at The Nation newspaper here. And so we work with journalists all over the world to improve the quality and quantity of environmental reporting by strengthening networks of local journalists and also focusing on communities who have less access to information. So at the moment we have about 11,000 member journalists all over the world. So we are a global network of environmental journalists, and we work with these journalists to respond to the various environmental challenges that our planet is facing. by supporting what we call network journalism. So in Thailand, for example, we support the founding of the Thai Society of Environmental Journalists. We also work with the Society of Indonesian Environmental Journalists. So all across Asia and the Pacific, we support journalists to come together and form associations and networks. And if in countries where there are already networks, we work with them to build capacity. We believe that it's important for journalists to work together, share information, and also more and more so to do transboundary stories. A lot of environmental issues are without borders, and so it's important for journalists to start working together as well to address some of these issues. Education, we do a lot of training and workshops for journalists on all kinds of topics. Climate change, biodiversity, pollution, but we also look at sort of journalism skills like data journalism, how to optimize your stories on using social media, and journalism is a form of journalism that uses interactive maps to give more context to stories. So we also develop tools for journalists to present their stories using maps and using data visualization. So when I saw that Nia is having this activity, this event today, and I told her that we just launched our climate change and health special report. So today I hope I can share some of the stories we've been supporting, we've been working with journalists on. So I think Renzo pointed out some of these points. There was a report saying that climate change and fake news pose the biggest threat to human health in the next 25 years. And these are two separate issues, but they are also very much connected. There's a lot of misinformation going around relating to climate change and climate change impact on health. And the cause of climate change is obviously human activities. I mean, there's still people denying it, but I think science has shown that it's very clear. And the impact of climate change is going to affect our health. And WHO has predicted, there's 250,000 additional deaths per year coming from some of these health issues that are sort of directly or indirectly exacerbated by climate change. But climate change is a very difficult topic to cover. Might be slightly easier now with fire burning in Australia, but other than sort of during very kind of disaster, when there's a disaster, then often we get these stories that point to climate change. But climate change is something that's slightly sort of slow moving, and the connection with human health may not be always obvious. So that's why at Internews we want to bring this human dimension to the story of climate change to help people understand climate change. So bringing in stories that draw the link between climate change and health can help the general public make sense of what's going on, and also draw a connection. It's important to engage with your audience. So I think health is a very clear approach to engage with audience. And of course, everybody needs trusted, timely, accurate information to make better decisions, and we need to know, and we have the right to know, the health impacts of climate change in order for us to make our own decisions for our lives, for our family. And the role of journalists, it's important for journalists to keep a watch on environmental abuses that can impact on our health and highlight how some specific populations are being affected more than others, and to urge decision makers to make policy changes. So this is the climate change and health special report that we just put up on our website on earthjournalism.net. So at Internews Journalism Network, we regularly put out calls for applications to our story grants for journalists all over Asia Pacific to apply. So they would submit their story ideas and we'll have panel judges to select the best stories. So we put out a call on climate change and health last year, I think it was the last quarter of 2019, and we selected a number of applicants and awarded them small grants to implement their stories. With the media sort of facing strong competition and from social media, and less people are investing in advertising and the media. So on one hand you have climate change that there's a lot more, there's a big need for information, factual information, timely information. But on the other hand, the media is also facing a real crisis with their own business model. So that's what we're trying to fill in here, providing sort of support to journalists, financial support as well as technical mentorship, right? So that they have the resources they need to cover these important stories, which otherwise may not be possible to do given the small margins that newsrooms have these days. So I just want to show some of the stories that come out from this whole for story ideas. More stories are coming up, so these are the ones that we have published, and I picked those from Southeast Asia, given that this is Southeast Asia Junction here. So this story, for example, talks about tidal floods in central Java, Pekalongan, which is a place known for its batik. Beautiful batik, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that, and how it's putting women's health at risk. So the impact of climate change on health is not, affects some population more than others, and women, for example, are disproportionately affected. In the story, it talks about how women, because of what they do at home, they're more exposed to the polluted water that's coming in because of the tidal floods. There have been tidal floods for the last few years, but it's getting worse because of sea level rise, exacerbated by climate change. And also, for the woman who works in batik factories, they spend hours standing in water that may be polluted because of the tidal floods to do their batik, without any protection. So this is a story on that, and we supported these two journalists to do a photo story looking at dengue. So I don't know whether any of these journalists here. Is it Laura? Yeah, right? Okay. So maybe you can tell us actually. You want to talk to us about this story that you've done a little bit, or you want to? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Sorry, I didn't know you would include.
Okay, maybe I'll say, yeah.
So it's the second year we have been supported by this network and this year we chose to look at dengue because since January 2019 most of the countries in Southeast Asia saw a rise that was not normal because too early, it was not monsoon, it was much more than the years before. Oh yeah, yes, will be better. Okay. And so we saw this in local media, that all the countries in Southeast Asia had to face a much more higher rate of dengue than usual, and even 6 months before the monsoon. And so we were wondering why, and one of the main drive of the rise is climate change. So it's hotter, more humid, and the mosquito that carry the dengue fever are just much more efficient. And on top of this, you have crumbling healthcare, and some population are much more vulnerable than others. So we focus on three on 3 parts of Southeast Asia that we thought were really representative. So we started in Bangkok because for decades people thought that you can only get dengue and malaria in the jungle, but actually the capitals were very hit this year on all the capitals of Southeast Asia, and one of the most affected neighborhood in Bangkok was Chinatown. So we spent some time in Chinatown because simply of the urbanization, how the houses are made and people live very close to each other, and there is some sanitation problem, and we looked precisely why people still die of dengue in Bangkok, why they shouldn't. And after this we moved to other vulnerable populations. So we went to Cambodia because in Siem Reap you have an hospital which is only for children, and for months they put on internet some emergency appeal for funds because they had to deal with 500 to 600 sick children per day of dengue for 3 months. So it was just, they were completely overwhelmed. And so it was the children of Cambodia who were also very vulnerable, and we moved to another vulnerable communities, which are the migrant workers between Thailand and Myanmar. And the problem for them is that with no legal status, you have no access to healthcare, proper access. So it's only 3 small NGO clinics that are there for them, and it's very limited. So we wanted to show that this kind of epidemics hit very diverse population, and we also wanted the side of the government, so we talked to a lot of ministers in Thailand who were open and talked to us and explained to us why they cannot face it. So that was very interesting to put the piece of the puzzle together. It's not one government, it's not one agency which is at fault, it's Southeast Asia is under enormous risk with climate change and urbanization, and it should be a collective regional responsibility because one country cannot stop it. This is what they said on the Myanmar border. So even if Thailand does a lot, there is so much cross-border movement that epidemics will always travel in the region, so mostly it's healthcare access that should be improved, and living condition of people in cities and villages. Yeah. So that took a long time too, because health topics are really difficult. We work with a photographer, so you need the visual aspect. And also to find the experts and the minister who wants to talk about it, because maybe you will talk about it later, but health topics are more and more politicized. Like for example in Cambodia it was really difficult for us to report because the government in power in Cambodia doesn't want people to say that there is an epidemic in the country that they are unable to control. So they put obstacles to journalists and NGO who try to inform people in villages. So we were followed around, and it's not something that's transparent. So it's really difficult to get. There is only one way to know the situation. It's to go on the field, because the official data will be an estimation at best because of many political or simply logistic reasons.
Thank you very much. That's really interesting. As Laura pointed out, these issues, it's not just the health issues, it's not just the climate change issues, governance issues, public health issues, it's poverty issues, all coming together, urbanization issues. So that's something we also sort of promote journalists to bring out the different sort of multi-dimension of the problem. And I think just to add a little bit, I took this quote out from your story, which I thought was an important one. It says, this doctor said, if we didn't have so many mosquito diseases to manage, we could invest more in intensive care and neonatal units. So, this is the increase in dengue cases is adding additional strain on a public health system that is already under such a lot of pressure and limited resources. This is a slightly more positive story, but in this era of coronavirus, I'm not sure how popular the bat is at the moment. But this story is a bit more positive story on how in Cambodia this innovative entrepreneur actually started farming bats to collect guano, which is the poo of the bats, which is extremely nutritious for the soil, and he see the opportunity there to cultivate guano, both to revitalize the soil, but at the same time help to address the issue with mosquitoes. So the bats are a really good predator, and it helps to take away sort of the burden of mosquitoes. And this one is on urban heat island. So with urbanization, you have this urban heat island effect, where the city is a lot hotter than the region around it, so it becomes like a really heated island. And with climate change, this is making it much worse. So, and lastly, health is not just on physical health. There's a lot of mental health issues as well that will come along with climate change. Of course, I think we're familiar with climate anxiety, but aside from that, when extreme weather are becoming more frequent, you're going to get more typhoons and natural disasters, and the impact on mental health is something that shouldn't be taken lightly. And this story is about that in the Philippines. Lastly, second last slide, I thought, these are some other stories, I think. There's still a lot of stories we told about climate change and health. I don't know how many of you are journalists here, but here are some sort of ideas that I quickly put together that I think, we should also potentially pursue stories looking at some of these topics. For example, is our health system set up to address challenges caused by climate change, and also whether the different ministries, are they starting to talk together? Do they have some kind of agreement to deal with these issues? Because it's no longer just an environment issue or a health issue. And also whether health impact assessments are conducted for climate change mitigation and adaptation. So some ideas here would be glad to hear your thoughts. And just to finish on a more positive note, we believe in sort of the power of information and stories, and we are documenting impact of media stories as well. This impact is not in Southeast Asia, but I thought this is a very relevant impact. So a journalist wrote about a story on heat waves and how it affects slum dwellers in Pakistan, and how they're really suffering because of the makeshift environment. It's a lot hotter in there, and the fact that they are slum dwellers, they don't have official status, they don't have ID cards, so they couldn't get access to public services. And after this journalist wrote the story, the local authorities actually decided to grant status to the slum dwellers so that they can access public health. So this is a nice little story. I thought it would be nice to end this presentation. Thank you very much.
Please sit down, both of you. I think we have a lot to digest and also to think about. So I want to open the floor for the first three comments or questions. And we have indeed some other who have also, Laura, who has also written about, and Alfredo, the mayor or vice mayor now, I understand there's been some change of the film that we have seen. so I'm sure you also can contribute to the discussion. So the first three, please raise your hands. Comments or questions? Welcome. Okay, one. Anyone? Other courageous one? No? Okay, so first you. And then maybe you can understand.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Ella, a student at Chulalongkorn University, but also doing internship at Stockholm Environment Institute. So the project that I'm working on is about climate change and indigenous people, but in terms of agricultural practice. So I would like to expand this field, like how to use the indigenous knowledge and system practice to, increase the people's adaptability to climate change in terms of health. So yeah, thank you.
I suspect that's what
Yes, please. Maybe you want to add from.
Good evening. Good evening to everyone, and thanks to Dr. Renzo for showing our story, and to the wonderful presentation of Ms. Amy. Storytelling definitely is a way to get people to be more involved, to talk about discussions. And by the way, I'm here for PIMA. I was just coming back from a field trip which ended here in Junction, so thank you for the invitation. Indigenous peoples indeed have a way of and their collective knowledge over centuries. Separate closer. Did you hear me? If I just yeah. If the collective knowledge of indigenous peoples are really important, to understand what can be used and how to address specific health issues that are being brought by climate change. But on the other hand, because of these climate changes, what happened was some of the indigenous knowledges no longer apply. So you have to put some science into the knowledge. It's not just that because what they know is because of a certain environment wherein it was created. The knowledge was created in that particular environment, in their particular moment in time, when some of these temperatures were not yet rising, when sea levels were not yet this high, storms were not yet this strong. And because of these changes, some of this indigenous knowledge needs to be updated as well. So what we have been proposing and working on also on the side is the Asia Pacific and the Caribbean islands is to work on this indigenous knowledge, put in some additional science to validate if the indigenous knowledge that they have can be tweaked just a little bit so that it is more acceptable for these communities to be able to adapt faster to the changing climate. I hope it makes sense.
That's why I invited Mayor Coro to be here, so he can answer the question on my behalf. But to add to that, unfortunately, the broader climate discussion, whether it's at the local level or at the global level, or even at the ASEAN level, indigenous people's voices are not heard. And because, unfortunately, government, those in power, or even what I would call the mainstream society, do not include them to be part of the discussion, in the conversation. So I hope your work will not just look at, okay, what's the applicability of indigenous knowledge, but in the first place, are they part of the conversation? Are they inside the room, or are they outside? And in addition to that, unfortunately, and because of their invisibility in the climate discourse, their needs, their unique needs, are not being taken into account. And because perhaps of whether their practices or because of the habitats where they live and thrive, they are also the ones who will be bearing the brunt of climate change ahead of the rest of us, the first ones to be affected. So, it's really, I think we should embrace it as an obligation. And, from a healthcare perspective, these are the same people that do not have access to healthcare, right? They don't have health insurance. They're probably not even counted in census, right? And then, they will be the ones to be either, experiencing flooding, or even if they're in the forest, their, homes will be buried, when a landslide occurs because of a typhoon or some climate-related extreme weather event. So, thanks for raising that. And, ASEAN is, a region where there's so many indigenous population groups. And I hope that their voices will be much more heard. And maybe that's the power of storytelling, and that's where maybe the journalists can play a vital role in making sure their voices are heard and amplified. Do you want to add?
Yeah, this is one of the objectives of our project is to sort of increase the voices of those communities who are most affected by climate change, and they are adapting and responding to climate change already in the different ways. So we do pay attention to amplifying their voices, and also bring them, as you said, bring them to the table to be part of that conversation. I think it's important for stories to be. I mean, we do get a lot of stories that are very worrying and the doom and gloom stories. Those are very important stories to tell, but on the other hand, these stories of resilience, of human resilience, need to be highlighted and showcased as well. And there are lots of stories like that among the indigenous communities that we would like to cover and work with journalists on.
Okay. Another round. One. Okay. I would like to see some more. Two. Okay. Another physician in the room. You want to say something, maybe? Perfect. Four. Okay. Volunteering. Okay. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Terry. I'm a researcher with the UNU Institute for Global Health based in Kuala Lumpur. So my question would be, what kind of tone in journalism that you would opt to use when you when we were to communicate all these issues? Is that a very defensive tone, or is it a very fierce, or more neutral or diplomatic? And then to what extent we take into account the sensitivity of these kind of issues?
I just have a little bit of a question about how is healthcare changing the way to make anything that's used more sustainable? So can anything be recycled, that type of thing?
Okay. You want to come back? Shy. Okay, the last one was. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Nisha. I'm a journalist from Green News. We are local Thai news agent reporting about environmental issues. So I wonder about the word climate change in your language, in Filipinos or in Chinese, because in Thai, when we talk about climate change, when we directly translate it, it's very hard and hard to access for people, and we have nickname to sayโลกร้อน which Thai people understand more, but it directly means global warming, which is not directly about climate change.
Okay, last one.
Yeah, so actually my question was related, I think, more to, there was an article, interestingly, a couple of weeks ago, the BBC, and they were looking at ancient civilizations, Khmer, Mayan, Aztec, right? These were very advanced civilizations for their time and technology, and in terms of why all of these civilizations perished, there's a lot of common themes that actually have parallels with what's happening with us, but perhaps not on a global scale, in terms of resource depletion, in terms of climate change, in terms of governance. And, these civilizations at the time thought that they would be able to outsmart, right, these problems and issues, but the history obviously shows otherwise.
Maybe I can add the last question. Oh, yeah. Francis, please.
My question is, with all these discussions on climate and storytelling, is one of the pending arguments now is migration. A lot of movement driven by either you're forcibly displaced, or because of climate changes you have to move, or natural disasters you have to move. And when they move, there's a lot of scare between these migrants bringing certain types of diseases, certain types of issues, stereotyping them as carriers of whatever doomsday, problems. And what I'd like to point out is how can your stories change all these paradigms, because migration is gonna happen, and it's gonna happen fast. It's gonna happen big, especially in Southeast Asia, wherein a lot of movement has been happening lately, and more movements will happen in the next few years. So for both of our guests this evening, how does these stories help us to accept migration, and how climate change driven migration or displacements does not reflect health impacts that they bring to the community?
My last question, because when we talk about climate change, and a little bit from the story, it seems like it is a natural things that is happening. We have not talked much about what is causing, right, all this climate change. The human component, particularly the commercial, industrial, the more politically sensitive issues. So how to make sure that climate change doesn't seem something that is neutral, because it has to do with very serious commercial, the economic model that we are using these days. So how to challenge that model, both in the story as well as in healthcare, because we know that healthcare is also these days extremely commercialized, and it has to do also with being green or not being green. So for both of you, so please be sure.
Okay. Yeah, there are a lot of questions, and I'll try to answer just some of them about the question about greening of healthcare. That is a movement that is already happening. Started in high-income countries because of resource availability and stuff. But just last week, I gave a 2-day workshop in a province in the Philippines for hospital leaders on how to transform their hospitals to become green, climate smart, renewable energy powered. So, there are ways to actually make things happen. And even in developing country settings, you will find hospitals that are already adopting, better waste management practices, green procurement, making sure from syringes to your tubes to your medicines, you purchase them from pharmaceuticals and manufacturers that abide by sustainability principles. Or, instituting natural lighting and ventilation, in your hospital building design. There's so many ways, there's so many examples, and I can share more later in private. The question about language. In Filipino, and of course the Philippines has like 120 plus dialects. We can't translate climate change into all those dialects. And even in Filipino, it's translated as pagbabagong klima. It's not necessarily very intuitive, especially to the ordinary person. And that is why the health framing of climate change, and I think it touches also on the tone, it's so powerful. I can talk to my patient about the diseases. I don't need to mention climate change. I don't need to discuss like how, fossil fuels lead to carbon generation and discuss the whole, pathophysiology of it. But I can tell about the diseases that will affect her or his children. Because of the changes in the environment, and then they get it, right? And then they start, doing, their little steps at home, turning off the light when it's not needed, segregating their waste, etc. And I just want to answer one last question so that I can give the rest of the questions to you about civilization thing, right? I think that's coming from the work of Jared Diamond. All of these, collapse, right? And I have a firm belief in this civilization, right? I think we've amassed a great deal of technology and wisdom, and we now have very complex global governance systems, which perhaps are delaying the action. But I have high hopes when the likes of Greta and the young people, it's the first time that you're seeing in the history of the world where the battle is not between nations but intergenerational. And I'm part of that generation, not part of the old generation. I'm in between. So I still, want to be optimistic that something will happen, but also realistic, and that's why, as a physician, I continue to think about what are the ways we can really minimize the casualty. 250,000 deaths annually, as WHO has conservatively estimated. It's not like it's a guesstimate, right? So I think there'll be more deaths and much more disease, and you have health systems that are so resource limited, and that is why we really need to think out of the box, how to curb the emissions, but also how to prepare our communities to be resilient and to be to survive in this era of climate change.
Lorenzo has answered the questions very well. Just to add a little bit more to that, in terms of the tone, journalists are in school, in journalism school, you are trained to be neutral. You need to have a balanced story. But there's something called false balance. I don't know if you've heard of that. And with climate change, even the BBC has been accused of false balance in the past by giving a lot of airtime space to climate change denials, when the science and the facts has clearly shown that human are to blame for climate change. So I think be aware of false balance. In terms of the tone, I still think a neutral tone is very useful. And what's more important is to engage with your audience, knowing what people are thinking. What are the biases, what are the preconceptions, and address them in the stories. In that way, then audiences would be more inclined to listen. Because if you're saying something that's totally against the beliefs of the audience, you're not going to get them to listen to you. So addressing that in the story. The question from Green News on language, I think that's why we find it really important to work with local journalists, grassroots journalists, and not just journalists from the country, but also from the provinces, from the sub-regions, because they know what language, what words would work with the local community. And I think journalists should definitely use languages that people can understand. So I mean, the stories I showed are all in English, but a lot of these stories are also in local languages, and we're trying to do a lot more working with journalism on local languages as well, and using formats that they're familiar with. In some places, it's radio stories, and or film, like what Renzo is doing. So looking at the different types of media is important as well. On the civilization comments, I think that's a really interesting story idea, and I hope journalists will look into that. There are so many angles that you can approach to the climate change story, and this is definitely an interesting one. And it's important for journalists not just to work with the usual suspects, but start looking at historical researchers, scientists, and linguists, and what have you, to start looking at different ways to tell the story. On climate migration, the whole migration issue is a big challenge all over the world, and I think bring out the human dimension, putting a human face to the issue is extremely important. These are not just numbers. I think this is exactly where journalists are really good at. You know, the migrants from Mexico crossing over to the US, all those human interest stories, stories of children being stuck in the borders. And likewise for climate migration, there are lots of, you know, there's huge movement of people happening at the moment, and putting a face to those numbers is really, really important, and tell their stories, going out there, be in the field at the location to tell their stories. The challenge we face is, you know, newsrooms are having smaller and smaller budgets to work with. They don't have the resources to allow one journalist to go out for a number of days to somewhere a bit further away to do their stories. And so it's important, you know, for more resources, and that's where we hope we can come in and also help journalists to do these stories. Climate is not a natural phenomenon, climate change. Yeah, definitely. We are trying to support a lot more investigative reporting, which is really difficult to do in this part of the world, with government, as Laura pointed out, not providing access to information and data, not willing to speak. And also safety of journalists is a big issue, and environment used to be quite a safe subject, but now it's becoming more and more politicized and dangerous. You're coming from Philippines, so would understand, you know, Philippines has the highest.
They now say that the endangered species are environmentalists and journalists.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I think we are all trying our best to work together and sort of protect that space for journalists to operate. But that also calls for, you know, the importance of support in investigative journalism, to take into these stories, to track the supply chains, to look into who's funding some of the sort of, you know, initiatives that are sort of not, you know, against sort of, or promoting coal, for example, and going against sort of climate change mitigation adaptation initiatives.
Indeed, even in Thailand, now the activists killed mostly are related to issue related to the environment, while before the political was the main one. So there has been a change. I want to have Adam just say, because he's a journalist who pays a lot of attention to migration. So maybe he can tell us how difficult it is to place stories on migration, because we expect newspaper to be open about this topic. I think there is a lot going on, and many are writing, but still, you always compete with other stories. So I would be interested to just 2 minutes, and then I will close the event.
No, I just think the stories need to be about people, you know, character-driven stories, and I think those will make it into media outlets, especially international media outlets. But as for migration, yeah, it's a very complex issue. By simplifying it and finding people who can give voice to the issue, and you know, human rights violation, or, you know, the refugees, asylum seekers, you know, trying to give voice to these people. They're very vulnerable, and you have to be very careful with what information you provide. I think these stories are very important and need to be definitely to be told in regional media, especially.
Can I just briefly on migration? Yeah. No, just want to make sure that the link between climate change and migration is not very well understood. But number two, we know the gap, and that is there's no international instrument that can protect climate migrants. Some journalists actually have been using the term climate refugees, which is a misnomer, because refugees flee away a country because of political persecution, and they are protected by the Refugee Convention. The Refugee Convention will not protect them. And Paris Agreement, which is the only climate agreement we have, it does not mention climate migrants. So there is a gap. And now that we see people moving because of climate change, we will be facing really big problems, really big challenges, and I don't know what's going to happen. Last year there was a group of NGOs in Manila that came up with the Manila Declaration on the rights of climate migrants. That was the first step to really articulate what are the rights of these migrants, albeit in a non-binding way. So now we need to find ways to formalize it, but that will be a huge political battle internationally.
And unfortunately, the refugee convention these days is also not really implemented by most countries.
Things are changing. There's an international court, the decision on the New Zealand kind of migrant case, Pacific Islander who wanted to migrate to New Zealand. There's a decision made just last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, recognizing climate change as a
first step
drive for migration. I think things are changing, and there needs to be more momentum to make these changes.
It's good that the speakers are both very positive, and we can always move to New Zealand in case we feel bad. Let's not forget Australia is putting its refugee in Christmas Island, Italy is paying Libya to keep away its refugees, and America, we know what they are doing too. So unfortunately, the general contest is not very promising, but we will continue to discuss and bring up as well as awareness of the complexity of the issue. This is the mission of Sea Junction. So please support us on your way out with a donation and enjoy the coffee and tea that is outside to continue this discussion. An applause for the two speakers.